Paulogia is an absolute machine when it comes to responding to arguments for the historicity of the resurrection, and a lot of you have asked me to respond to his arguments. In a short video, Paulogia explains how he believes that Christianity began without the resurrection, so I figured this would be a very good starting point. I realize that he has a lot to say on this topic, but this is a very nice summary of his hypothesis, so let's go ahead and dig in. Here's Paulogia.
When presenting the case that Jesus rose from the dead, the Christian will often point to a set of historical facts which generally boil down to Jesus was crucified, people claimed he rose from the dead, and now the church exists. Now, would an actual resurrection of Jesus explain these facts? I suppose. But a supernatural explanation can be used to explain anything. Did an all-powerful being have a hand in starting my car this morning? It's certainly possible. But it's also possible that when I turned the key, a mechanical process drew air and fuel into the cylinders. A spark was ignited, combusting the system to begin the engine revving. We can't rule out that God started my car, but his involvement isn't necessary to explain my running car. Is there a similar explanation for the existence and history of Christianity?
Now, one thing Paulogia and I agree about here is that I don't think positing a supernatural cause is necessary when a natural one will perfectly suffice. Nevertheless, I don't think explaining the origins of Christianity is as smooth and as simple as describing how a car starts, or that we should always prefer a natural hypothesis over a supernatural one. Let's just say that you're driving to a small church in the desert of Mexico. You're scheduled to be the speaker there, and someone even prophesied to you that you would give a very important message. That's the only reason that you're there. It definitely wasn't part of your original plans. Along the way, your car breaks down. So you get out and you left the hood. You actually have some mechanical background and you plainly can see that the engine is toast. It's extremely hot, your kids are with you, and you don't have cell service in the area that you're at the moment. Things aren't looking very good. So what do? You and your family go ahead and join hands and pray. At the urging of your wife, you go ahead and try and start the car again, and inexplicably it works. You end up getting to the church, preaching a message of hope, and even helping somebody who was considering suicide. You could not be more grateful. When you look at your car again after church, you see that there's no sign of the engine damage that you previously saw. Now, you could believe that you hallucinated, or that you were greatly mistaken, or perhaps somehow the engine repaired itself. Those are possible explanations, but they're not very probable. You and your family saw smoke coming out of the engine, your wife saw the damage. Given all the background information, I don't think that you would be irrational at all to conclude that something miraculous happened. So in other words, when something can be explained without difficulty by supposing a miracle occurred, but not without larger implausibility by assuming that a miracle did not occur, that is evidence for a miracle, and this is just basic Bayesian reasoning. Now let's stop talking about cars and move on to dead people. What is the most likely thing to happen when somebody dies? What occupies the most probability space, so to speak? Well, the answer is nothing. No grief hallucinations, no visions, no conversion disorders, no stories of empty tombs. These things already have a very low probability built into them. We could say that God miraculously kept false messiah figures alive until their deaths, just like he miraculously started my car this morning, but we definitely don't have to posit that. Now, let's think about first century Palestine. According to Josephus, there were several messianic type figures that drew large followings during this time, and the Gospels even tell us that John the Baptist was asked if he was the Messiah. We also know about Simon Bar Kokhba, who specifically claimed to be the Jewish Messiah in the early 2nd century. What happened when these people died? Well, what happened is exactly what we would expect. They eventually lost their following. No one claimed that they were alive afterward. No visions, no hallucinations, no cases of conversion disorder, bupkis, crickets. I made a comment briefly summarizing these points on Twitter a few months ago, and Paulogia retweeted and responded saying, the most likely outcome from buying a lottery ticket is basically nothing, and yet every lottery winner can be traced to buying a ticket. So in other words, Paulogia admits that what we're about to see him propose in future videos to explain away the origins of Christianity are extremely low. Last I checked, the odds of winning Powerball is about 1 in 300 million. Yet his video is titled How Christianity Probably Began. When I pointed this out rather sarcastically, as you can see on the screen there, he retorted that he at least had a ticket. Now, notice what's happening here. If I'm getting Paulogia correctly, a miracle can't even get into the game. Now, he is more than welcome to correct me if I'm misunderstanding him. I like Paulogia. I think he's a good guy. But according to how I'm reading him, the prior probability of a miracle is just too low. It can't even get off the ground. It cannot be in the game at all. So if I'm correct, any explanation, no matter how contrived or clumsy, is automatically better than a supernatural explanation, no matter how clean and elegant it is. Well, why should we think that? It seems as if Paulogia has dug himself into a pit, epistemically speaking. To require more evidence for a supernatural claim than a normal one is perfectly acceptable. But saying that no amount of evidence can even possibly overcome the prior probability leaves you in a nigh unfalsifiable position. If the resurrection hypothesis can't be considered good enough to even get into the game, how exactly can Paulogia know if he is wrong? I love what philosopher Tim McGrew has to say in response to this kind of fuzzy logic. In the book, 4 Views of Christianity and Philosophy, McGrew writes, any initial prejudice against miracles, any ground for assignment of a low initial probability to the claim that a miracle has occurred, cannot be greater than the rational prejudice, great or small, against the conjunction of 2 claims, that there is a God who has destined his human creatures for a future state of existence, and that he wants to tell them about it in such a way that they can know that a message comes from him. If there is a God who wants to make such a revelation known, and he wants to make it in such a way that we cannot mistake it for the mere words of man, then there is no other way to seal it than by a miracle. A miracle would be the guarantee to us that this is a genuine word from God and not just someone else's fine-sounding philosophy or a well-crafted tale. And the conjunction of these 2 claims, I think, not seem to any well-informed person to be so absurdly low as to lie beyond the reach of evidence. Okay, with all this philosophical brush cleaning out of the way, in the next video we'll talk about how Paulogia treats the historical data. His first target will start with the Apostle Peter.